"These items," the store manager said, his voice a blade of ice, "cost more than you'd make in a year. People like you don't belong in Elysium Beauty." The words, spoken to the only black woman in the store, hung in the air like a toxin. Two burly security guards gripped Zora Phoenix by the arms, their fingers digging into the soft cashmere of her sweater. Her designer flats, a quiet statement of Italian craftsmanship, were practically lifted from the polished marble floor. A path of shame parted for them as they marched her past gleaming displays of luxury skincare. Some customers averted their eyes. Others raised their phones, eager to capture what would soon become the biggest mistake in Elysium's history. The humiliation was a fire in her veins, but Zora's face remained a portrait of dignity. Her eyes were fixed ahead, her jaw set, but her expression was composed. She did not struggle. She did not scream. That was not her way. Following them was the manager, Alexander Whitfield, his arms crossed over a bespoke suit, a smug satisfaction plastered across his face. As the security team shoved her through the glass doors, one final push sent her stumbling onto the Fifth Avenue sidewalk. She caught her balance instantly, straightened her spine, and smoothed her sweater with a deliberate calm. Without giving them the satisfaction of a single tear, Zora reached into her bag. Her fingers, adorned with a wedding band worth more than Alexander's annual salary, dialed a number she knew by heart. "Ethan," she said, her voice steady but tight, "you won't believe what just happened." What the staff at Elysium Beauty didn't know, what Alexander Whitfield couldn't possibly guess as he watched her through the glass with a dismissive sneer, was that on the other end of that call was Ethan Reynolds, and he was about to become their worst nightmare. If Alexander Whitfield had known the story behind the woman he'd just ejected, he might have chosen differently. Zora Phoenix was not born to wealth. She was the daughter of Haitian immigrants who arrived in America with nothing but hope. She grew up in a modest Brooklyn apartment, her father driving a taxi for double shifts, her mother cleaning hotel rooms, both sacrificing everything so their daughter could have the opportunities they never did. Zora graduated top of her class, earned a full scholarship to Columbia, and received her MBA from Harvard. She met Ethan Reynolds at a charity gala she had organized. While others circled the quiet tech billionaire with transparent agendas, Zora was too busy ensuring the event ran smoothly. It was her indifference to his status that first captured his attention. Their courtship was private, their wedding intimate. When they married, she insisted on keeping her name. "My parents gave me this name," she'd explained. "It carries their journey. I won't let it disappear." Though married to one of the wealthiest men in the world, Zora moved through life with a quiet assurance, her wealth evident not in logos, but in her confidence and generosity. The day she walked into Elysium Beauty, she wasn't thinking of her net worth. She was simply a woman looking for a new serum before the $50,000 a plate charity dinner she was hosting that evening. The morning had begun with golden sunlight striping the minimalist decor of their Central Park West penthouse. Zora had risen, as always, at 6:15 a.m. "Are you sure you don't want Marceline to pick that up for you?" Ethan had asked, referring to their household manager. Zora had smiled, squeezing his hand. "You know how particular I am about ingredients." Growing up watching her mother suffer painful rashes from cheap drugstore products had made her meticulous. She dressed in her everyday uniform, premium dark-wash jeans and a simple cream cashmere sweater. No flash, no logos. Her only tell was the understated wedding band on her finger and the $10,000 leather flats on her feet, handcrafted for comfort and elegance. Her town car dropped her at the Fifth Avenue storefront, a marvel of glass and brushed gold. "Take your lunch break, Thomas," she told her driver. "I'll be at least an hour." The doorman, in a tailored black suit, opened the door without meeting her eyes, the first subtle sign of the chill to come. Inside, Elysium was a temple to luxury. Italian marble, crystal chandeliers, and the quiet hum of exclusive commerce. Zora stood for several minutes waiting to be acknowledged. A woman in a Chanel jacket was greeted by name and offered champagne. Another was whisked away to the VIP consultation area. A third, draped in fur despite the mild September air, was immediately swarmed by an eager associate. Not a single person made eye contact with Zora. Unfazed, she moved deeper into the store, toward the rear where the truly exclusive collections were displayed. She was examining a six-piece set priced at $5,000 when she felt a cold presence behind her. She turned to find a tall man with meticulously styled silver hair and icy blue eyes that assessed her with immediate disapproval. His name tag read, Alexander Whitfield, General Manager. His lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. Can I help you find the exit? This isn't a museum. The implication was as clear as the crystal displays around them. Actually, Zora replied, her voice melodic and measured, I'm interested in this collection. I have an event this evening and wanted to try the new illuminating serum. Alexander's eyes narrowed, scanning her simple clothing. These products require a significant investment, he said, his tone condescending. We've had issues with certain people handling luxury items with no intention to purchase. The term certain people hung in the air. I don't typically carry my income statements when I shop, Zora said, a slight edge now in her voice. Nor do I believe you require financial documentation from your other customers. His false politeness cracked. Listen, he hissed, his voice low but venomous. These items cost more than you make in a year. We don't offer free samples or makeup tutorials for window shoppers. The store had fallen silent. Other customers were watching now. Actually, Zora said, her voice carrying in the sudden hush, I was planning to purchase the entire limited edition collection. Alexander laughed, a cruel, performative chuckle. Of course you were, he said loudly, and then raised a hand to signal his security guards. We have someone causing a disturbance. As they manhandled her out of the store, Zora's mind was not on the embarrassment, it was on the principle. Why should she have to prove herself worthy of basic respect? Behind the glass, Alexander watched as she made her call, a smirk on his face. He expected tears, perhaps an angry tirade. He did not get them. I know you want to help, Zora said into the phone, her voice controlled. But I need to handle this my way. She listened, nodding slightly. Yes, darling. Elysium Beauty on Fifth Avenue. The manager's name is Alexander Whitfield. As she walked away, her head held high, the manager returned to his office, congratulating himself. He had no idea he had just set in motion a reckoning. Hours later, the private elevator opened directly into their penthouse. Zora found Ethan pacing, his phone pressed to his ear. At 38, he was an impressive figure, running a global tech empire with a quiet intensity. I don't care what their quarterly projections are, he was saying, his voice vibrating with controlled fury. I want it done. Now. He ended the call as he saw her, crossing the room to pull her into his arms. Thomas called me. He saw everything. Zora leaned into him, the composure she'd held all day finally cracking. They humiliated me, Ethan, because I'm black. I know, he said, his hands framing her face. And it ends today. This isn't just about you, Zora. How many others have they done this to? People who don't have our resources, who just have to swallow that humiliation and walk away? The question hung between them, heavy with shared history. It was about the 14-year-old Ethan, followed by security guards in department stores. It was about his mother, questioned at the grocery checkout. It was about a generational pain that no amount of money could erase. But it could, perhaps, buy a certain kind of justice. What exactly is the plan? Zora asked, her gaze searching Ethan's face. Before he could answer, his phone chimed. He glanced at the screen and answered, putting the call on speaker out of respect for his wife. Talk to me, Marcus, he said. We have their corporate structure, came the voice of his chief legal counsel. Elysium Beauty is a subsidiary of Pinnacle Luxury Group. They're publicly traded, but the control is tight. Still, there's an opening. Their stock took a significant hit last quarter. If we move aggressively, we can acquire a controlling interest in a matter of hours. Ethan's eyes locked with Zora's. How fast? If we initiate tonight, we can secure majority ownership before the market opens tomorrow. The board won't know what hit them. Do it, Ethan said, his voice a blade of pure resolve. And Marcus, absolute discretion. No one knows we're behind this until I give the word. He ended the call, and in the silence that followed, Zora's conflicted feelings were plain to see. She understood the impulse, the deep primal need to see injustice met with consequence, but the sheer scale of his response troubled her. Buying an entire company to punish one manager, she said carefully, seems excessive. Ethan took her hands, his touch grounding her. This isn't about punishment, Zora. It's about transformation. That store, that entire brand, thrives in a bubble of exclusion and elitism. They've built an empire on making people feel unworthy. Their bill has come due. Zora considered his words, her analytical mind already turning over the possibilities. So you're not going to destroy the brand, she murmured, understanding dawning in her eyes. You're going to take it over and remake it. Exactly, Ethan confirmed, his passion igniting the air between them. We will excise the poison, starting with everyone who stood by and watched what they did to you. Soon, Alexander Whitfield would learn that the woman he had so casually dismissed was, for all intents and purposes, his new employer. And that was only the beginning. The next morning, the everyday theater of Manhattan's most prestigious shopping district played out as usual, a parade of wealth and privilege, of tourists laden with bags and executives striding with purpose. But today, the script was about to be rewritten. A new scene was about to unfold, one that would become the stuff of retail legend, whispered in break rooms and boardrooms for years to come. At precisely 9:58 a.m., 2 minutes before Elysium Beauty was scheduled to open, traffic on the bustling avenue seemed to hold its breath. Heads turned as a gleaming Rolls-Royce Phantom, an extended model in anthracite with a mandarin leather interior, purred to a stop at the curb. It was a vehicle so exclusive that a year's wait was considered expedited delivery. The uniformed driver, Thomas, the same man who had witnessed Zora's humiliation the day before, emerged with military precision and opened the rear door. Before the staff gathered inside the store could fully process the arrival, a second identical Rolls-Royce glided to a stop behind the first. This wasn't an arrival, it was a statement. From the first vehicle emerged Zora Phoenix. Gone was the casual attire of yesterday. Today she wore a precisely tailored white pantsuit that seemed to capture and reflect the morning light. Her natural hair was swept into an elegant updo, accented by a single gold pin. There was no flashy jewelry, no obvious branding, just the unmistakable confidence of a woman who knew her worth. A nearby tourist, assuming she was a celebrity, raised his phone to snap a photo. He wasn't entirely wrong. From the second Rolls-Royce stepped Ethan Reynolds. His charcoal suit was bespoke yet deliberately understated, his presence commanding without being ostentatious. The power couple stood for a moment on the sidewalk, a tableau of quiet authority that brought pedestrians to a halt. Then, in perfect synchronization, 4 black Escalades pulled up, forming a protective semicircle. 12 individuals in sharp business attire emerged, men and women with the focused expressions of people who closed billion-dollar deals before breakfast. Each carried a sleek leather portfolio embossed with the Reynolds Technologies logo. This wasn't a shopping trip, it was an operation. Inside Elysium Beauty, staff had clustered near the windows, their chatter giving way to a growing unease. "Is that?" one associate whispered, her eyes wide. "It can't be," her colleague replied. "Why would Ethan Reynolds come here?" The video of Zora being escorted out had circulated through an employee group chat overnight along with rumors of who she might be. Most had dismissed it as gossip. Now, watching the unmistakable figure of the tech billionaire approach their doors, a cold certainty began to set in. Alexander Whitfield emerged from his office, alerted by the sudden hush. He straightened his tie and plastered on the practiced, empty smile he reserved for VIPs. He had handled titans of industry before. This was his domain. "Places, everyone," he instructed crisply. "Whoever they are still customers." A young associate, Bethany, approached him hesitantly. "Mr. Whitfield, I think that's the billionaire, Ethan Reynolds." "I know perfectly well who that is," he snapped, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. "Now get to your station." As the doors opened at precisely 10 a.m., Zora entered first. Her steps were measured, deliberate, the click of her heels on the marble floor echoing through the suddenly silent store. Behind her came Ethan, his expression unreadable, followed by the procession of executives who fanned out with practiced efficiency, taking positions throughout the store like chess pieces being set on a board. Alexander's carefully constructed composure shattered. The blood drained from his face as he watched the woman he'd thrown out yesterday, now flanked by an army of corporate power. "She can't be," he stammered to his assistant, his prejudice still warring with reality. "She was dressed like a nobody." Sweat beaded on his forehead as he hurried forward, his mind racing for a way to salvage the situation. He intercepted them before they reached the main floor, forcing his most ingratiating smile. "Mr. Reynolds, an honor. Welcome back to Elysium Beauty." he said, his voice cracking slightly as he extended a hand. "How may we assist you today?" His eyes met Zora's. Recognition dawned, followed by a frantic recalculation as his worldview crumbled. Zora did not take his hand. She simply regarded him with the same quiet dignity she had maintained as his security guards marched her out. Her gaze was not angry or triumphant. It was the calm, appraising look of someone evaluating a property for purchase. The silence stretched. Alexander lowered his hand awkwardly. Ethan stepped forward, his presence filling the space. "I believe you've met my wife," he said. His voice was level, but it carried an undercurrent of steel that made several employees flinch. Alexander's smile dissolved. "Mrs. Reynolds?" he stammered, his face paling to a ghostly white. I had no idea. We would have, of course, extended our premier client services had we known." A murmur rippled through the staff. Phones were surreptitiously checked, connecting dots that should have been obvious. "That ring," one associate whispered to another. "That's why it looked so expensive." The security guard from the previous day, Kendrick, emerged from a back room, stopping dead in his tracks. His professional neutrality evaporated, replaced by raw fear. He rushed to Alexander's side. "Mr. Whitfield," he said urgently, "there's something you need to know." "Not now, Kendrick," Alexander hissed, still trying to regain his footing on the collapsing ground beneath him. "The point," Ethan continued, his voice now addressing the entire store, "is that yesterday, my wife was racially profiled in this establishment. She was publicly humiliated, physically manhandled, and escorted out of a store where she intended to spend over $20,000. He paused, letting the amount hang in the air. That single sale would have covered a month's rent for several of the associates now staring in horror. "But we aren't here to spend money," Ethan said, removing his sunglasses. "We're here for an acquisition." The tension in the room became a physical force. A glass on a nearby counter, knocked by a trembling hand, shattered on the floor, the sound as loud as a gunshot. Ethan nodded to one of his team, a sharp-featured woman with silver hair. She stepped forward and presented Alexander with a folder. "What is this?" he asked, his voice a tremor. "Ownership transfer papers," Ethan said simply. "As of 4:30 this morning, Reynolds Holdings acquired a controlling interest in Pinnacle Luxury Group, the parent company of Elysium Beauty." The store froze. Even the ambient music seemed to die. Alexander's mouth opened and closed, soundless. He fumbled through the pages, the dense legal language confirming his deepest fears. "That's impossible," he finally managed. "The brand is valued at over $1 billion. The board would never approve." "The board wasn't given a choice," the silver-haired woman interrupted coolly. "We acquired 63% of outstanding shares through a series of overnight transactions. They were notified 30 minutes ago." A cold, mirthless smile touched Ethan's lips. "I could have bought 500 of your stores, Mr. Whitfield. Your entire company represents less than 2% of my net worth." The staff was no longer looking at a customer. They were looking at their new owner, an owner who had witnessed their culture firsthand. "Now," Ethan said, checking his watch, "I believe we have an emergency all-hands meeting." As if on cue, his team moved through the store, gently but firmly directing every employee to the center of the floor. There was no resistance. Alexander stood frozen, the folder clutched in his hand, his carefully constructed world in ruins. Ethan placed a supportive hand on the small of Zora's back. This wasn't a husband's revenge, it was a partnership's stand against injustice. "Let me be clear," Ethan began, his voice resonating through the hushed space. "What is about to happen is not just about one incident. It's about a pattern of behavior that ends today." He turned his gaze directly to Alexander, who swayed on his feet. "You're fired. Effective immediately." "No, please," Alexander begged, all dignity gone. "This store is my life. I've been here for 12 years. Zora, who had been silent, finally spoke, her voice clear and steady. 12 years of judging people by their appearance. 12 years of deciding who belongs and who doesn't, based on your own narrow prejudice." Alexander looked desperately around the room for an ally, but found only averted eyes. One of Ethan's team locked the front doors and lowered the blinds, plunging the store into a more intimate, somber light. Alexander Whitfield, who had built a career on making others feel small, now understood what it was to be powerless. The reckoning had arrived. The gleaming floor of Elysium Beauty had been transformed into a tribunal. Display cases were pushed aside, replaced by rows of chairs where the stunned employees now sat. At the front, a large projection screen had been erected. Ethan stood at a podium, his expression grave. For those who don't know me, I am Ethan Reynolds. As of this morning, I am your new boss. But before we discuss the future, we must confront the past. He nodded to his team. The lights dimmed. On the screen appeared a series of charts displaying customer demographics from Elysium's 50 locations. My team spent the night analyzing your data, Ethan explained. We found that despite operating in diverse global cities, Elysium's customer base is 92% white. This is not a coincidence. The screen shifted, showing a montage of security footage from stores across the country. The pattern was undeniable. White customers were greeted warmly, while customers of color were ignored, followed, or treated with suspicion. The footage from yesterday played last. The entire staff watched in silence as Zora was snubbed, condescended to by Alexander, and finally, physically removed. Audible gasps filled the room. Zora stood beside Ethan, her posture radiating quiet strength, reclaiming the narrative of her own humiliation. When the lights came up, Alexander was shaking uncontrollably. "It was a misunderstanding," he cried, stumbling to his feet. "We have to protect our brand's exclusivity." "Brand exclusivity," Ethan repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "Let's talk about what that really means at Elysium. Let's hear from some of your other victims." At his signal, the doors opened and 5 people entered. They were different ages, different ethnicities, but they shared a common experience. They took their seats at the front, facing the employees. A distinguished older black woman spoke first. "I am Dr. Eleanor Jenkins, Chief of Neurosurgery at Mount Sinai. 3 months ago, I came here to purchase gifts for my surgical team. Your manager informed me that the items were likely out of my price range." Next, a young South Asian man in a flawless suit. "Raj Patel, hedge fund manager. I was followed by security my entire visit last month, despite spending over $30,000. Finally, an elegant Latina woman in her 50s spoke, her voice resonating with quiet authority. "Maria Gonzalez, State Supreme Court Justice. I was asked to check my purse at the door. No one else was." A profound silence fell over the room, broken only by the quiet sobbing of an employee in the back row. The ugly truth of Elysium Beauty had been laid bare, not by statistics, but by the dignified, painful testimony of the people it had wronged. Alexander sank back into his chair, a broken man. The temple of exclusivity had fallen, and on its ruins something new was about to be built. I was asked if I was looking for the employee entrance. With each testimony, a cold wave of understanding washed over the faces of the assembled staff. Shock gave way to a dawning, collective shame. This wasn't an isolated incident, it was a deeply ingrained system. But Ethan was far from finished. 3 more people entered the room, former Elysium employees, all of whom had either left or been fired after raising concerns about the company's practices. "I was told to prioritize customers who looked like they could afford our products," a former sales associate confessed, her voice trembling slightly. "The training never said it outright, but the examples they used made it crystal clear who they meant." Another testified, "My commissions were consistently lower because my manager assigned me to customers he didn't think would make large purchases. They were almost always people of color." As the testimonials mounted, Alexander Whitfield seemed to fold in on himself, the architecture of his arrogance crumbling with each damning word. When it was finally his turn to speak, his swagger had evaporated, replaced by raw desperation. "Please," he begged, his voice cracking. "I have a family to support, a mortgage, children in private school." Ethan's response was a blade wrapped in velvet, measured, yet relentless. "So did the many qualified applicants you rejected because of their skin color. People with degrees, experience, and talent who never made it past the interview because they didn't fit your brand image. Your family won't suffer, Alexander. They will simply have to adjust to a new reality, one where a lifestyle built on exclusion has finally come to an end." He turned, his voice resonating in the sudden, tomb-like silence of the room, addressing the entire staff. "Effective immediately, Elysium Beauty is closing all operations worldwide for restructuring. All 50 locations will shut down as of noon today." A collective gasp, a ripple of frantic murmurs. A senior sales associate named Veronica rushed forward. "You can't do this," she cried. I've been with Elysium for 7 years. I have sales goals, clients who rely on me. Did Mrs. Harrington rely on you yesterday? Ethan asked quietly. When you rushed to serve her while ignoring my wife, your employment record shows a clear and consistent pattern of selective service. Veronica's head snapped toward Zora, her eyes wide with panic. Please, she pleaded. I didn't know who you were. And in that moment, Zora finally spoke. Her voice held a quiet, resonant authority that cut through the rising chaos, silencing the room in an instant. That, she said, stepping forward, is precisely the problem. You shouldn't need to know who I am to treat me with basic dignity. You judged me on my appearance, and that is a mistake you only get to make once. Her gaze swept across the room, making eye contact with each employee. Some of you will have the opportunity to reapply after the restructuring. Those who treated every customer with respect may find a place in the new organization. The rest of you will receive 2 weeks severance. Consider it time to reflect on how you want to show up in the world. The precision of what followed was chilling. As security began escorting shell-shocked employees out, Ethan's team distributed envelopes containing termination papers and severance information. This wasn't an impulsive reaction. It had been meticulously planned. Alexander remained frozen in his seat, the last vestiges of his power stripped away in less than an hour. The store that had been his kingdom was now his cage, each shimmering product a monument to a world that had just expelled him. This isn't about one bad day, Ethan said as the room emptied. It's about dismantling a culture of exclusion and building something better in its place. As the last employee filed out, Zora stood in the center of the vast, empty store. She was surrounded by products designed to enhance beauty, a bitter irony in a company whose practices had been so profoundly ugly. The transformation had begun. 6 months can change everything. The same Fifth Avenue storefront was now utterly transformed. Gone were the intimidating glass fortresses and the air of cold exclusivity. In their place stood a welcoming facade, a new name emblazoned in elegant gold lettering: Legacy. The grand reopening drew crowds that stretched for blocks. Fashion journalists and business reporters jostled for position. This wasn't just another store launch, it was a revolution in the making. At the center of it all was Zora Phoenix, no longer the humiliated customer, but the newly appointed creative director of the entire Legacy brand. We are creating something that has never existed before, Zora explained to the press. Luxury without exclusion. Exceptional quality available to anyone who values it, regardless of the assumptions others might make about them. The interior maintained its fine craftsmanship, but had shed its intimidation. Display cases were accessible, not fortress-like. Price tags were clearly visible. And most strikingly, the staff reflected the vibrant diversity of the city itself, people of all backgrounds, ages, and body types. Meanwhile, across town, a very different scene was unfolding. Alexander Whitfield, once the imperious manager of a luxury flagship, now wore the red vest of a discount cosmetics chain. His customer, a young black woman, was asking detailed questions about foundation shades. "Yes, ma'am," he said, his once haughty tone replaced by a practiced, careful deference. "We have 16 shades for deeper skin tones. Would you like to try some samples?" The irony was a bitter pill, one he was forced to swallow daily. No high-end retailer would touch his resume. Back at Legacy, the transformation ran deep. In a training room, new employees learned about unconscious bias in a program led by Zora herself. Luxury has traditionally been defined by who it keeps out, she told the attentive group. We're flipping that model. Our value is defined by inclusion, by creating an exceptional experience for every single person who walks through our doors. In his office overlooking the bustling store, Ethan Reynolds gave a rare interview. Legacy isn't just a name, he explained. It's about what we leave behind. For too long, this industry has reinforced harmful hierarchies. We're proving there's another way, one that's not just more ethical, but more profitable. The financial reports backed his claim. In just 6 months, Legacy had exceeded Elysium's previous sales figures by 34%. It had become the first Black-owned global luxury retail chain in history, sending shockwaves through the industry. Perhaps most significant was the Legacy New Designers Initiative. In a studio above the store, Zora personally mentored 10 aspiring designers from underprivileged backgrounds. Among the first cohort was Bethany, the young employee who had tried to intervene on Zora's behalf. Her handcrafted skincare line, based on her Jamaican grandmother's recipes, now occupied a special display near the entrance. One quiet Tuesday, a young woman entered Legacy, her manner hesitant. In the old days, she would have been ignored. Instead, she was greeted warmly. As she lingered by a display, visibly calculating what she could afford, Zora approached her. "That serum changed my life," Zora said gently, pointing to the product. "Let me give you a sample to try before you decide." The conversation that followed wasn't about a sale. It was about connection, about seeing someone, truly seeing them. Before the young woman left, Zora handed her a brochure for the designer's initiative. "You mentioned you're studying chemistry," she said. "We're always looking for fresh perspectives." That evening, Zora gathered the staff for their daily reflection. "True luxury isn't what you own," she told them, her words becoming the brand's unofficial mantra. "It's creating space for everyone to shine. Today, how did you help someone shine?" The legacy of that one moment of discrimination had become a complete reimagining of what luxury could be. The statistics told a story that traditional retail had always claimed was impossible. Revenues were up, employee satisfaction was at 92%, and the workforce now reflected the diverse world it served. What had begun as one woman's humiliation had catalyzed a movement. Zora Phoenix and Ethan Reynolds had proven that sometimes true justice isn't just about consequences, it's about building something better from the ashes of what was wrong.